protest last month. So, at the start of training camp, the Cowboys walked on the field arm in arm with Dallas Police Chief David Brown and family members of the officers who were killed. Stephen A., what was your reaction?
First of all, let me say this. We were off the air, obviously making the transition from the old era to the new era. We were on vacation, so we didn't have an opportunity to extend our deepest condolences and express our heartfelt condolences to the family of the victims, the 5 police officers killed in Dallas. Our hearts go out to all of them. I'm speaking on behalf of the entire show here because I know everybody feels the same way. And Police Chief David Brown is absolutely sensational in terms of how he's handled this whole ordeal with the professionalism and the class he deserves. Our praise. And he has received it nationwide, and it is very, very well deserved. I also like to sit there and say that in no way am I about to imply that the Dallas Cowboys were insincere in any way in terms of, you know, their heartfelt emotions in regard to that matter. If you've got a pulse, you've got blood circulating through your veins, obviously your heart goes out to all the family members of the victims, the loved ones are left behind, etc. I am in no way trying to imply that the Dallas Cowboys are not sensitive to that they don't care, that what we saw from them yesterday as it pertains to locking arms with Police Chief David Brown and other police officers, that they were not sincere. My problem with the Dallas Cowboys is that we live in a world where we constantly talk about guys being role models, and I'm very serious here. Yes, I'm a Dallas Cowboy hater, but that's all in fun because I'm a native New Yorker, and obviously I like to root against the Dallas Cowboys. In this particular situation, I'm incredibly serious because I had our researcher extraordinaire, David Sabino, pull up a couple of situations involving the Dallas Cowboys. This is a list.
That's a long list.
There's a list of the Dallas Cowboys that have gotten in trouble over the last few years. I mean, it's everything here from NFL substance abuse to obviously bringing Greg Hardy on board, to arrest for brandishing weapons, to arrest for public intoxication, to arrest for family violence, to arrest with somebody charged with intoxication, manslaughter, to arrest involving DUI, to arrest involving shoplifting, to arrest involving marijuana possession charges. I mean, the list goes on, and I'm not going to sit up there and cast aspersions on those particular individuals on this particular day because I'm not joking. It's nothing to laugh about, and I'm being very serious. I'm saying that if you are America's team, if you are the team with the star on your helmet, playing in that billion-dollar playpen, etc., etc., I don't blame you one bit for doing what you did yesterday in terms of locking arms, taking the picture. Obviously, what happened was in Dallas, so we understand the correlation there. But it just got me to thinking that, you know what, you know, clearly while you don't wish this on anybody and you know that the Dallas Cowboys as an organization, as individual players, and beyond as a fan base, nobody wishes anything like this to happen. Not if you got any kind of decency within yourself. It just took me back a second and said, you know what? If you have so much respect for the law, why don't you try obeying it as an organization? Why don't you try milking headlines for what you do on the football field instead of the transgressions that continuously happen off the field? That's the kind of thing that resonated with me, Max. It resonated with me profoundly, and it was the first thing that jumped on my mind. I got more to say, but go ahead.
Dallas Cowboys should do better off the field. We all should. I mean, you know, no one's perfect. And I get it. There's a special level, or was it a pouch, in Dante's Inferno for the hypocrites. You know, I understand you're behaving one way or saying something else, right. But I'm reminded of what the president said at the Dallas Memorial for those police officers when he told the story about that mother who took her 4 sons to the protest because she was worried about their safety given what was going on with the police and young African-American men in this country. And they're the police keeping the peace and allowing them to peacefully, you know, ensuring that they can peacefully protest when this maniac opened fire.
Right.
And due to the heroism of the police in Dallas, it wasn't much worse than it already was.
That's right.
And the most moving part of the story, as the president was speaking at the memorial, was that the 12-year-old, I think he was, son, one of the 4 sons that the mother brought there, now wants to be a cop based on what he saw. And that was out of that tragedy was born this kind of uplifting, unifying, supportive theme. I think if the Cowboys, I understand that some of their behavior off the field, or maybe even disproportionate to the rest of the NFL, if you want to make that argument, is not good. But if there is a kind of larger humanitarian issue and a prison full of, people who've broken the law want to come together to show solidarity on that humanitarian issue, I'm all for it.
But
let alone the Dallas Cowboys, who are a big, organization. I understand that a lot of them are millionaires. They make a lot of money. This is always the argument with superstar or professional athletes. They have all this money, and many of them went to college. Why aren't they doing better? But it's still, 75 people on a football team. You include the practice squad and everything. It's a lot of people, a lot of them from impoverished backgrounds, etc. Mm-hmm. I understand we'd like everyone to do better, but I think in this case, I am all for anyone who wants to show solidarity and support to the Dallas Police Department.
And in no way do I disagree with that point. I stand with you in unison in regards to that. I want to make that very, very clear. But what I'm talking about is what hits the mind's eye the second you see that. See, for example, I don't think the Dallas Cowboys were hypocritical. I think that the Dallas Cowboys were incredibly sincere. How can you not be? But are you telling me that the Dallas Cowboys, based on who they are, who they've been on the field and off the field, how they seem just as hell-bent on stealing headlines as they are in trying to win? Because we can't certainly say not winning, because they haven't done much of that over the last 20 years. In trying to win, you have such a zest for headlines. Are you trying to tell me that the critic out there doesn't look at you and question the legitimacy of your authenticity in terms of being so supportive? Now, again, those are people that are subhuman as far as I'm concerned, because you've got to believe, if you've got any kind of spirit inside you, okay, that they are clearly very, very sincere. And I'm certainly not challenging that. But what I'm saying is, when one transgression after another continuously takes place with the same organization, and you seem averse to the effects of it because you're stealing headlines because of it, the cynic out there, not Stephen A., as much of a cynic as I am of the Cowboys, but the abnormal cynic out there, the ultra uber cynic out there, is going to look at you and they're going to say, how authentic were you in all of this? Because you could have done what you did without gaining publicity for it. There was a way to do it without everybody having to see it, but you wanted to make sure that you sent that message. Yet we have a track record here which you associated with transgressions, not violent ones. Let's be clear about that. Not violent ones, but nevertheless transgressions. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Some of them. I'm sorry. Greg Hardy was on the Panthers before the Cowboys. That's why I didn't bring that up. But here's the deal. And this is why it's so important. This is where it resonates with me, perhaps differently than you, Max, perhaps differently than you, Molly. When you think about some of the things that emanated, or some of the things that led up to the Dallas shooting, Black Lives Matter and police brutality and the things that were taking place, the protests and unarmed black citizens getting gunned down by police officers, et cetera, et cetera. Those kind of things that we've talked about all over the airwaves, on the news or what have you, well, what's the common denominator here? You're talking about black men. And so when you look at the Dallas Cowboys, those who have been transgressing, okay, the fact of the matter is it ain't the white dudes doing it on the Dallas Cowboys. And so when you have that going on and you look at that reality, again, I'm saying to you that I would hope that a moment like this elevated the level of priority in their mind. We need to fly straight and do right and make sure that we don't just practice this when a police officer in front of us who's a hero in our eyes based on how he handled everything in the aftermath of those shootings. We want to sit up there and extend this far beyond that particular day when we're locking arm in arm with police officers and bringing attention to violence on both sides, violence against police officers, violence on behalf of a few police officers. We want to make sure we bring attention to that. But I'm saying in the case of the Dallas Cowboys, it needs to extend further than that because they're the Dallas Cowboys. And you need to convince us that you're not just looking to make headlines all the damn time. That's what I'm saying.
If you're right about the cynics looking at the Cowboys and seeing it as something like a publicity, not stunt, but some way to get them some good press, then you're right in that. If you're right about those cynics, then the Cowboys are kind of in a no-win situation.
Right.
Because what are they supposed to do? Not show public support and be criticized for that, or show some public support and some real hardcore cynics would feel cynical about it. It does point out in that case that if that's the case, then the reason they'd be in a no-win situation is because they haven't done better already. And it does highlight I don't know if it's the necessity, but the benefit of flying straight for some of these guys who have not done so well in the past in terms of their behavior off the field.
I root for the Dallas Cowboys to lose on the football field. I do not root for any of them to lose in life. I want all of those guys to succeed. I want them to be safe. I want them to make sure that they avoid the kind of mistakes that they've obviously found themselves in on far too many occasions. Now, maybe, just maybe, it's being unfair to the Dallas Cowboys because they're in the news more than a typical organization, and if it was somebody else, we would not have heard as much about it. That's not the impression I get. The impression that I get is that you're the Dallas Cowboys. It's almost like you have this unwritten mantra, just win, baby. Like I said before, the problem is they rarely win. Over the last 20 years, they've got about 2 playoff victories. They've been a walking piece of mediocrity. They've been in the news far more for their transgressions than they have been for anything productive on the football field. And I'm saying that needs to stop, particularly when you find yourself in a situation like this.
You've got to give it to Jerry Jones. Speaking of that subject, getting a little bit off the kind of social component of it and onto the field, you got to give it to Jerry Jones. The #1 brand in American sports is the Dallas Cowboys. Think about that. Ahead of the New York Yankees, ahead of the Los Angeles Lakers. I'm talking about heritage franchises that have won by far the most championships in their sports, in the Lakers' case, in the modern era. The Celtics have the most overall. Most of them were kind of BC. But in the modern era, and they're in the 2 biggest, most expensive markets. Then you look at the Cowboys. They simply do not have the same history of the Yankees or the Lakers. They are in an area where the real estate is not nearly as expensive as New York or Los Angeles. I mean, it's just not in Dallas. It's pennies on the dollar. And a lot of the valuation of franchises we know are real estate holdings and stuff. You have to give it to Jerry Jones. Everything you said is true. They have almost no playoff wins in decades. They have 2 in over a decade, 2 playoff wins, and yet they remain the most valuable franchise in American team sports. That's amazing.
Well, listen, I know others would like to give Jerry Jones credit. The person I'm going to give creded to are the Tex Schrams of the world.
Yeah, I agree.
The Tom Landrys of the world.
But he kept it going in terms of the value.
He did keep it going when they traded away Herschel Walker for a boatload of players. Jimmy Johnson, Jerry Jones got 3 Super Bowl rings, drafted Michael Irvin, drafted Troy Aikman, drafted Emmitt Smith. We get all of that, and he deserves credit for what they did in the 90s. But prior to that, there was a tradition, a history, and a fan base that was indelibly etched in the American psyche, which is that of the Dallas Cowboys. Because you played on Thanksgiving Day, with Tex Schramm pushing for that. Because you had the star on your helmet. Because you were Tom Landry with the shotgun offense and all of this other stuff. The Dallas Cowboys were and have been since a damn near addiction. We get all of that, and Jerry Jones deserves credit.
But if Jerry Jones
built off of that,
if there's no Jimmy Johnson, Barry Switz, really more Jimmy Johnson era, if that didn't happen, then we're not thinking about them the same way, because eventually through attrition, you start to lose the luster. And you think about the Deion Sanders move, where Jerry Jones is pushing for the salary cap. He's spearheading the hard cap, and he gets it through, and the day he gets it through, they signed Deion Sanders, and everyone's like, well, how did you can't? You're the one who said, and he's like, well, we're prorating the bonus. I mean, he was kind of a leader in terms of the business and suppressing the labor costs on the one hand, and on the other, making sure that the Cowboys stayed relevant by getting the piece that would ensure another championship.
That's true, but that doesn't negate the reality that based off of everything that you just said, it just augments and elevates the point that when you think Jerry Jones and football, you think P.T. Barnum and Bailey. Circus. That's what you think, because winning has not been their M.O. Making headlines has been their M.O. And as great as it was to make this particular headline, in the end, here's what it comes down to. It's a headline for something other than what you did on the football field, which has worked successfully for them from a marketing perspective, but not much in the way of winning football games. And at some point in time, not only can they be held accountable for that in terms of their lack of production on the football field, we also need to hold them accountable, because if you're going to lock on with the police officers, and we all know where there's smoke, there's fire. So with all the transgressions that we hear about with the Dallas Cowboys, you know good and damn well there's more. But, you know, you have, you know, connections with the police and beyond. At the end of the day, if you're going to lock arms with them, make sure that you go out there and you conduct yourself in a professional and upstanding fashion so we're not looking at you and thinking that you're just trying to get headlines.
Just so for clarity's sake here, do use this moment as a kind of springboard to do better.
Exactly.
Got it. And as you guys alluded to, 20 seasons since the Cowboys have won more than a playoff game. That was 1995. Darren Woodson on that championship team. He will join us a little later in the show. And when we come back, we're actually going to stay in the NFC East. Josh Norman chose to leave the Panthers and go get paid by Washington. But is he getting exposed in practice by his new teammate? We'll show you and we'll explain next.
Fair.
Yeah?
You're talking about one-on-ones. The one-on-one is structured for the quarterback and wide receiver to win all the time. No pass rush. Quarterback just sits there and pats the ball. The wide receiver runs his route exactly how he wants to run. There's no pressure involved on the quarterback side. We used to get beat like this all the time as a defensive back. I don't care who you are. In one-on-ones, it's set up for the wide receivers to win, and that's totally unfair.
Yeah, one-on-ones, like in the NFL, when Norman's on Odell Beckham, it's set up for the wide receiver to win.
No, that's totally different.
Burnt him all day.
Yeah, but
dropped a couple passes, but
thank you.
Okay,
that doesn't mean.
Okay,
when you
but it's not because Norman was in the. Where was Norman?
That's not getting burned when he dropped the pass.
Where was Norman?
Doesn't matter. Did he drop the ball?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is what I'm saying to you. With pressure, it's a totally different game. And we saw Josh Norman. Listen, am I saying Josh Norman is the elite of the elite, like Richard Sherman? No.
That's what we want to know. Is he worth this money?
I think he's worth the money. If someone's willing to pay it, yes, you are worth the money.
But you're
Simple
saying
as that.
He's not elite.
No. But if you were a GM and you had to price talent, is he worth being the highest paid corner in the NFL?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But if I am a team like the Washington Redskins and I feel like I need a corner, listen, cornerbacks are just like quarterbacks, are just like left tackles. They don't walk around and they don't grow on trees. Right. You have to find a guy that can willingly go 50-50 on the outside and match up with Dez Bryant, Odell Beckham, whoever it is.
You still got to find that guy.
And that's, well, I feel like the Washington Redskins make that decision that said they saw what he did against Odell Beckham, which he played okay. I mean, it wasn't great, but when they saw what he did with Dez Bryant, and he shut Dez out for 4 quarters. So that's what you want, and that's what a lot of teams do. They see a guy in a different division or a different conference, and they say, this is how he matched up with certain guys. We want him on this team, and is he worth the $15 million? Yes, he's worth the $15 million to the Washington Redskins.
I don't like this.
Why?
I actually agree with Darren. He's not wrong. Here's the deal, Max. First of all, Josh Norman can play. That's number one. Secondly, Odell Beckham Jr., there's no shame in losing to him. This brother's on another level. We understand he dropped one pass. We understand that there was a couple of times he got open. We understand that he lost his head a little bit, and had that not been the case, it would have been one of those situations where essentially what it would have come down to is that Odell Beckham Jr. may have ended up getting the better of Josh Norman even more so than he actually did. I get all of that. But here's the bottom line. When you look at it, pay attention to what's transpiring. You got Joe Barry and his zone schemes. You've got the fact that Josh Norman is a system player. Now, if you hired him to be a shutdown corner a la Deion Sanders, of course there's a problem. Where I agree with Darren, where we're being unfair to Josh Norman, even though Josh Norman is capable of covering, the reality is that when you looked at Carolina's defense, there was some zone going on. He was assisted. You had the crew, Kuechly and Thomas and the boys. You know, he wasn't alone. In Washington, they gave him that money not just because of his talent, his name, his cachet, and the fact that they needed to buffer their secondary, but also because they knew that they're going to be playing zone schemes. They're going to be employing that. So what you did was grab a guy that you knew you would need, because Breland being back there by himself, or with an aging D'Angelo Hall who could still play, you needed some assistance. You needed a name. You drafted some kid in the 3rd round to play corner, where you were ultimately able to get rid of Culliver and unload him. So they buffered their secondary because that's a problem. Then you look at Kerrigan and the crew, and you look at this rookie, Preston Smith, who led all rookies with 8 sacks last year. If you're capable of getting to the passer more and you're playing zone, Then, obviously, like Darren is alluding to, you're going to have a limited amount of time to get at the quarterback. Therefore, you got Josh Norman, who's going to look even better because of that, not to mention the fact that he's going to have help. It's not some kind of matchup with him against Odell Beckham Jr., because if we're being real about it, is there anybody that you know of in the NFL? I don't care whether it's Patrick Patterson, that is a bad boy, whether it's Richard Sherman or my man Joe Hayden in Cleveland, who don't get enough love, but he going to get it here because Joe Hayden's a bad boy. Okay? So let's be real. Can anyone up here definitively, you know your football too, Molly, can anybody sit here right now and say that anybody in the NFL can guard Odell Beckham Jr. by themselves?
No.
One-on-one?
No.
Well, then what's the problem?
Here's the problem. Well, first of all, let me start by saying Josh Norman's a good player. I thought he was a crazy great player, like top 3 defensive player for a while, and then I saw certain things that had me back off that and say, no, this is a zone corner. And don't forget, Washington's the kind of place like Champ Bailey, when they traded Clinton Portis when running backs still had a lot of value, and Portis was like, I mean, he was just a flash. You couldn't even see. They traded Portis in his prime for Champ Bailey. They value shutdown corners at a point when Champ Bailey was the best corner in the game. That's not what they're getting here. They're not getting a shutdown corner here. Now, I'll even give him some credit as even not to try and just win the argument, that he's more mature than Odell. And the fact that Odell had never dropped a pass where he was targeted and just drops the pass in his career, and he dropped 2 that day, I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that Norman applied enough psychological, at least, pressure to Odell that it rattled him. And you even hear Odell's comments since then. Odell's still fixated on this dude, and Norman's like, yo, why are you still talking about me? And Odell's the much more famous player and considered even better at his position. I'm not going to argue that. And I also understand if you're going to run zone and different things, he's a very useful player, Josh Norman. I get that. This is my issue. The NFL is a hard cap league. In a hard cap league, the job of a GM before anything else is to properly price commodities, in this case, players. You better be able to put the prices right. You better be able to price that properly, because every dollar you overpay for one guy is a dollar you can't pay for another guy. Now I ask you this. Is Josh Norman worth a $50 million guarantee?
Go ahead, Darren.
Hey, you know what? If the Washington Redskins are willing to pay what they paid him, whatever it is. But listen,
I'm not saying that's not his market value. I'm saying should they have?
I think they
did they properly price him?
Look,
come on.
I do. I absolutely do. Now, listen, I haven't always been a Josh Norman fan. Have not. And it took me until last year to watch from week 6 on to see what kind of player he is. This is what you're getting in Josh Norman. Are you getting a shutdown, follow you around corner? No, you're not getting Patrick Peterson. You're not getting Richard Sherman or maybe Darrelle Revis, but what you are getting is a guy with tremendous confidence, a guy that you feed off of. I've played with players that were half as talented as Josh Norman, but they had tremendous confidence, and you feed off of it as a unit. And I thought, when you watch Carolina play, Josh Norman was in a huddle, and he saw whoever broke the huddle, Larry Fitzgerald went that way, there went Josh Norman. He's in your face. That's what you want to see
a smart
in your player. A smart football player that's greedy and wants it.
Here's the deal, y'all. Look at this list here, these dollars. Josh Norman's at number 1, $50 million guaranteed. Patrick Peterson's number 2, $48 million.
I get that.
Joe Hayden, $45 million, number 3. Richard Sherman, $40 million, number 4. Darrelle Revis, number 5, at $39 million. Janoris Jenkins, number 6, $28.8 million. You could make a legitimate argument that there are about 4 corners in the NFL that may be better than Josh Norman.
Absolutely.
Straight up.
Yep.
That's no disrespect to Josh Norman, all right? But let me also take into account, not only are you paying for production, but you also pay for potential, which is something that we try to gloss over, but that's a reality. Josh Norman is 28. Josh Norman is not only 28, but this dude was from some nondescript school in Carolina, Coastal Carolina, if I remember correctly, okay? Worked his way up, worked his way through the practice squad and beyond. He didn't even want to leave Carolina. He just wanted what he thought his worth was, and he wanted them to break the bank for him. Fair enough. What I'm saying to you is that when you are 28 years of age and you went through the terrain that he went through, wasn't the first-round pick, wasn't the seventh-round pick, okay? He went, and you work your way onto a National Football League team and get to a point where you establish yourself from being some nondescript dude on a practice squad to being one of the elite corners in the game, because just because you might not be top 4 don't make you elite.
That's right.
When you combine that with the fact that the need for the team that you went to is similar to the system you played in Carolina. You combine that with the fact that you went from Carolina in the NFC South to the NFC East, where only one team was over 500 and everybody else stuck up the joint and wet the bed. I'm sorry. That justifies the dollars.
Well,
that justifies the
happy
dollars.
He got his money.
I know that. I know that. But I'm saying it justifies
paid.
I'm saying it justifies it if you're the Redskins.
How could, look, I get it. Also, he's the next man up, and this is how it works. Whoever the latest really good player is resets the market.
That's right.
That's generally how it works. I just think if you're going to guarantee the most dollars in the NFL at the position to a corner, that guy should be a shutdown corner. There aren't that many of them, I get it, but I don't think that's Norman.
Well, I'm saying you don't think that's Norman, but my problem is this. Let's look at the Redskins. Let's look at the fact that they're 9-7. Let's look at the fact that they franchise tagged their quarterback at $19.9 million. Let's look at the fact that they were the lone team over 500, that they've been a playoff, that they are a playoff team. Now, they haven't made back-to-back playoff spots since 96, 97, okay? And they haven't, and Lord knows,
they ain't going to do it this time either.
Well, they may not, but we don't know that. We don't know that. Questions about the Giants' defense, no matter how much money they spent. Questions about the Eagles all over. Question about the health and the psyche of your Dallas Cowboys. But they're not knuckleheads, but their actions are indicative of knuckleheadedness. Okay? So you got all of that going on. It's just the truth, Darren. It's just the truth. So I'm just saying, if you look at Washington, you go out, you get Norman. You draft another corner in the 3rd round. You still got Breland, who is elevating, okay? You still got D'Angelo Hall, who is experienced. You got the Ryan Kerrigan. You got a rookie that's got 8 sacks on his docket, backing up Kerrigan. You've got a team with a potential pass rush. Now, they give up too many yards rushing on the first time. That was their impediment on defense, believe it or not. It wasn't their passing defense. It was the fact that they gave up over 5 yards or a rush on first downs. So you take all of that in consideration. If you're in the process of cleaning this up, which Josh Norman's presence will help assist in that matter, then I think it's a good deal.
If the point is that they are at a moment of like extreme leverage for a player where the right guy can put them over the top, a tipping point, right?
Absolutely.
Like Gladwell can tip them in the right direction, and Norman is that guy, then maybe you can justify the $50 million.
And I'm saying to you, Max,
you better get it done now.
But here's what I'm saying to you, Max. Maybe, just maybe, what you're not saying is what you need to say. The Giants stunk up the joint. The Dallas Cowboys stunk up the joint. Maybe what you're really saying is that the Redskins were somewhat fraudulent because the other teams, including your Giants, to some degree my Giants, were relatively weak, and certainly your Cowboys. Oh, please.
I was surrounded by Giants. I didn't know this.
Please. No, I'm a Steelers guy. I'm a Steelers guy. I'm a New Yorker, but I'm a Steelers guy.
From way back.
Come on, man.
I love my Steelers.
You need to stop.
Big Blue. Who said that? That's not.
The division is up for grabs again, as it always is. All right, you're going to get to...
That's right.
You're going to get to see Beckham versus Norman September 25th at MetLife. That one, week 3. Darren, thank you for being here.
By the way,
it's always good to see you.
There's 2 moments in my life as a football fan that are sickest. Number 1 on the list is when Tim Tebow threw that pass to Demaryius Thomas against the Steelers in the playoffs. The other is when Neil O'Donnell threw that interception.
Go ahead,
and the Dallas Cowboys beat the Steelers in the Super Bowl. Oh, please.
I'll let you wear it.
I never heard of Larry Johnson before or after. But that day, Larry Brown, I'm sorry, Larry Johnson, Larry Brown.
Molly and I have some pretty good memories of recent Giants Super Bowls, too. I can't think of them offhand, but
just a couple.
Remember them undoing the greatest team of all time.
I remember the Giants as well. I remember those days.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
Man, it's time for you to go.
Let's leave it there. Thank you, Darren. You didn't think we could get through this whole show without addressing Draymond Green. Well, he found himself in another compromising situation over the weekend, sending out an inappropriate Snapchat picture. We will react to that and how it could affect his future when we come back. Is Draymond going to last next season with the Warriors?
I don't know. I don't know.
Whoa. Right. When Stephen A. Smith says, I don't know if a guy is going to last with a season with the team, My first question is always, are you just kind of thinking about it, or is this based on stuff you're hearing?
No, I'm thinking about it because of the people that I know within that organization. Let me say this.
Yep.
It's very important that I qualify my statements because I'm a huge fan of Draymond Green, the player and the person. I love the guy, and I think that the kind of energy that he brings to the basketball court, I'd want him on my team any day. Gotten to know him a little bit. I'm very, very fond of the Michigan State program because I love me some Tom Izzo, who I would want, if I had a son, I would want him playing for Tom Izzo. That's how I feel about that man. Here's my thing about Draymond, and I hope he's watching this because forget, you know, the snafu, that's his personal business. Whatever mistake he made, that's fine, and I ain't getting into all of that, okay? I work for Walt Disney. I'm just not going there. What I will say is this. Draymond Green is being praised by a lot of people because of what he does on the court. My brother, do not think for 1 second that they won't turn against you in a flash. He needs to understand this. The Golden State Warriors have Kevin Durant now. Now, obviously, Draymond has the kind of requisite skills that complement both Steph, Clay, and Kevin Durant being on the same team. But it also diminishes the need for him if he becomes too problematic. Now, I don't believe that this is something that would happen, but let me tell you something. As somebody who's gotten to know the Warriors organization, whether it's Joe Lacob, whether it's Bob Myers, to a lesser degree, Steve Kerr. I think a lot of people misconstrue my thinking Mark Jackson should have never been fired, which is something the Warriors know that I have always felt takes nothing away from the great organization that they are, the great coach that Steve Kerr has proven to be, even though he didn't have a great Game 7. And by the way, Steve Kerr is a fantastic guy. He's a good man. So I don't want this to be misconstrued. But what I'm saying is Bob Myers is also a good guy. And Joe Lacob is about winning. And he's about winning and being positive while doing it. And he absolutely loves Draymond Green. But Draymond Green speeding down the highway at 118 miles an hour and Snapchatting it at the same time, even though his mama was right when his mama came out publicly and said, don't act like we've never tested how fast our car could go from time to time. There are people that have foolishly done that. He's not the only one.
But no one's sitting here, of course.
Well, of course not.
Of course not. None of us.
Never that. But the point is that not only that, but then you got to remember the situation after the finals and you got into a beef and got arrested, you know, because of the beef in the nightclub, okay? And then now this. These are not things that have made the Golden State Warriors the brand that they have become. And I'm not saying this to chastise Draymond Green. I got nothing but love for the brother. I'm saying this to warn him, and it's not to cast aspersions on the Golden State Warriors organization. I'm saying any organization, any brand. They can hug you, they can kiss you, they can sing Kumbaya to you, they can throw parties for you, they could do all of this stuff. At the end of the day, any organization that believes you are compromising their money and their bottom line because of image issues ultimately will turn on you if you're not careful. And that is the message that I want to send to Draymond Green. He's got to stop making the news for these reasons, which is why I said I don't know. Because the personnel that the Golden State Warriors have in place, Max, if Draymond Green finds himself continuously getting bad press, if there is one team that can actually afford to lose him right now, it's Golden State. I sincerely doubt they'll do it, but they could afford to. He needs to be careful.
I don't think they can afford to, and I think that's why he's okay. Now, by the way, not only just the off the court stuff, but sometimes a guy is so high energy all the time, that can even wear thin in the locker room, even if he is the emotional center and the kind of spiritual leader of the team. If that dude is on all the time, that can wear thin over time, I think.
Well, you're right, because remember, during the halftime of the OKC Warriors game, he, cussed out Steve Kerr.
Yep.
I'm here to tell you that Draymond actually got a bad rap for that because, considering how he's the workman, You don't go into the locker room and isolate him and calling him out, which is how he took it, which is why he blew up. So I don't condemn him for that, but it was still bad press for Draymond.
Draymond was almost the Finals MVP. Let's not forget. He was almost, if one of the greatest players who ever lived, probably the greatest player since Michael Jordan at his best, didn't go ham in Game 7, Draymond, they win that game.
32, 15, and 9.
Going to be Finals MVP. I mean, but he's the crazy guy on the team. A lot of teams have that one crazy guy, right? Where it's like a Dennis Rodman on the Jordan Bulls team, the second three-peat, where it's like, can this guy hold it together when we need him to hold it together? Vontaze Burfict, that was the and it was like actually at the end of the game he couldn't. Draymond, I think the jury's still out there because on the one hand, he did get suspended a game. They did lose that game. On the other hand, the way that series played out, I don't think that would have made a difference. I don't think LeBron was going to let those guys lose. And Draymond didn't do anything else where, well, he did actually, but he didn't wind up missing any more time. So he is really walking that fine line for that crazy guy who you hope can keep it together. But this is why I really think he's okay. I don't think he's in jeopardy. And I think even with Kevin Durant on the team, they really need him. Strategically, he's what makes them different. He has revolutionized the big man position, and you could call it a 4, you could call it a 5. Point forward, point center, whatever it is.
Man shoots 49% from the field and 38% from three-point range.
From 3. Now, you can say that's because, and I think correctly, that Steph Curry is not all three-pointers are created equal. Steph is shooting from so far away that's actually in the spread pick and roll. That's really creating more space than there's ever been created.
Correct.
And so it makes Draymond go from a 33% shooter to a 38% shooter, which is all the difference in the world in the modern NBA. But Draymond can shoot the 3. He can swarm in the paint. He can rebound. He can make great decisions with the ball as a kind of a point forward. He can put the ball on the floor. He's so well-rounded that, in fact, when other GMs are looking at the Warriors, strategically speaking, one of the players you must take into account, even with Steph and Durant on this team, really the question is, what are we going to do about Draymond? How do we match up with that? Or how do we get a guy like that? Like Karl Anthony Towns right now has supplanted for many Anthony Davis as the big you want because he came into the league shooting the 3 very well. They made him do it in college. And now it's like he's kind of Draymond Green, but bigger and better and more talented. Like that's one of the Draymond's existence is one of the reasons a guy like Karl Anthony Towns exists with the game he has and the reason it's so coveted. And besides the fact that he's Steph's real pick and roll partner. I mean, I think strategically, Draymond has such importance to this team that even with Durant there, his importance cannot be undermined.
Well, see, that's all fine and good and excellent basketball analysis, but that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is a Golden State Warriors team that's scheduled to move into a new arena in a couple of years in San Francisco. We're talking about a Golden State Warriors team that has the golden boy, the reigning 2-time league MVP, who can it get any nicer than him? I mean, one of the true gentlemen this sport has ever seen. We're talking about a backcourt that's considered the greatest shooting backcourt in the business. We're talking about an owner in Joe Lacob who is elite, absolutely believes his organization is elite, and literally considers themselves the new standard bearers. And so when you look at it from that perspective, again, I'm not saying this is something that they're entertaining at the moment or anything like that. I'm simply giving Draymond Green a heads up because I got that much love for the brother. I want him to know I don't care how much they hug you and smile at you and tell you something. Don't push the envelope if you want to stay in Oakland, because if you keep being in the news for the wrong reasons, they will turn on you in a heartbeat. There's a history of players who was shell-shocked that an organization that loved them dearly and valued them decided to say goodbye. Be careful.
Last point on that. I still think he's okay, even having said that, unless the Warriors are actually a loser organization who cares so much about their brand image that they will sacrifice championships. Durant and I love Kevin Durant. In Game 7 against the Warriors, he came up small. In Game 7 against Cleveland, Steph Curry looked like he didn't want it. I know he was probably compromised. Klay Thompson went cold. Do you know who went bananas? Draymond Green, with the chips on the line when it seemed like no one else wanted it. In Game 7 of the finals, Draymond showed up big. And that dude is a championship player.
We can reach an accord. You're probably right in terms of, based off of what you said, maybe we don't move him now. But next summer, if you keep getting
Don't slip, Draymond. Don't slip.
Don't slip.
You better keep playing.
You're saying that. I'm just saying. I'm just looking out for him and saying, don't slip.
Don't let it compromise
don't slip.
your production.
Stop this.
Your team's money.
And I'm quite sure that Tom Izzo will tell him the same thing.
You better keep getting those triple doubles on a winning team.
No question. When we come back, there is a quarterback competition brewing in San Francisco. Is Chip Kelly already making a mess with the Niners? We'll explain and react when we come back. Max, what is going on here?
I mean, I have to assume that Chip Kelly is trying to light a fire under Colin Kaepernick. And maybe it's because, you know, the report that Gabbert was supposed to be drafted first overall, maybe instead of Cam Newton that year, and that's so insane. Maybe I'm underrating Gabbert, but he's been around for a minute now and has not shown me at least any indication that he can be an elite quarterback, where Colin Kaepernick has already been an elite quarterback. He's already done it on this level. I mean, he had Jaws and others saying, I'm looking at this guy like he has the potential to be the greatest quarterback who ever lived. That was to make people as knowledgeable as that even think that about you because of your play at the NFL level. In the playoffs at the NFL level, you've already been there. We know you could do it. We don't know that Blaine Gabbert can do anything like that. To me, Gabbert is like maybe not quite a in case of emergency break glass kind of quarterback, but certainly not a guy who should be, especially with his, you know, jitters in the pocket, pushing a guy for the job who, look, let's not forget, Kaepernick, when he was at, you know, Chip Kelly used to watch his games at Nevada because he was with Oregon wanting to play that read options, thinking, this is the guy I kind of like, the way they're using him and the things he can do. He was studying that guy and the system he was running, and he has him now. So very difficult for me to believe that already Chip Kelly is thinking about moving on from Colin Kaepernick, who seems to be the perfect quarterback for him. Well, I have to assume Stephen A. is trying to light a fire here.
Well, then you don't pay much attention to Chip Kelly. I respectfully disagree with you, Max Kellerman. I'm kind of figuring that you were in the sunshine in Southern California, about 3,000 miles away, and you didn't want to pay any attention to any cold weather cities like Philadelphia, because I can assure you that this is definitely in Chip Kelly's makeup, his mindset. He is exactly the kind of dude. He's trying to light a fire under Colin Kaepernick so he can run his so Colin Kaepernick will run his own behind out of town, as opposed to Chip Kelly having to do it for him. Keep in mind that this is the same Chip Kelly that gave Colin Kaepernick permission to sit up there and seek a trade, and Colin Kaepernick thought he was going to end up going to Denver, but he didn't want to take a pay cut, so he ended up back in San Francisco by default, which basically means to Chip Kelly that you really didn't want to be here, therefore I don't want you either, but since we got to pay you at least $11 million, the hell with it, I'm going to sit up here and keep you in uniform, but I damn sure ain't planning or relying upon you. So here we go with Blaine Gabbert. Now let me say this about Blaine Gabbert. I've never really watched Blaine Gabbert. I remember he got drafted 10th overall by Jacksonville in 2011. I remember seeing him a couple of times over the years where he looked as petrified as a lost puppy in the pocket, looked like he was shivering in his figurative boots, for crying out loud. Didn't appear to have any heart whatsoever. The flip side to this is that has a strong arm, has good athleticism, seems to have the tools in shorts to do a lot of different things. Yes, in other words, not in uniform. You know, when he's out there practicing, you know, he looks beautiful. He looks absolutely sensational, okay? But I'm going to defer to my boy that used to work here, my man Chris Carter. You know that Hall of Fame wide receiver that was an exceptional NFL
I'm aware
analyst?
of him, yes.
I'm gonna lean on him. What he used to make it a priority to say every Sunday morning at least, and sometimes on Mondays on Mike and Mike. Blaine Gabbert stinks. That's what he said. It's not me, because I'm not qualified to say somebody stinks if I've barely watched them, because Blaine Gabbert has no interest in me. I have no interest in Blaine Gabbert whatsoever. But Chris Carter watched him, and he kept saying, Blaine Gabbert stinks. That's what he said. And I'm going to go with that. I'm going to go with a Hall of Fame wide receiver telling me when a quarterback stinks.
So wait, you're saying Jaws said on the one hand that Kaepernick has the chance, has the potential to be the best ever, and on the other hand, Chris Carter said Blaine Gabbert stinks.
Yes,
best ever stinks.
Now, when it comes to Jaws, I would say I believe in Jaws as well. However, I'm imitating Jaws, Juwan Jaworski here. But here's the point. In the end, Colin Kaepernick, we've seen what he could do. We haven't really seen if Blaine Gabbert could do anything, even though he threw for 2,000 yards and 10 touchdowns last year with 7 interceptions. Here's what we have seen, and here's where your notion is outweighed. We've seen what Kaepernick has done. We haven't seen much from Gabbert, but we know who Chip Kelly is. And Chip Kelly is the kind of guy that will do everything he can to facilitate Blaine Gabbert getting the job for the sole express purpose that Colin Kaepernick wanted to leave. That's enough for Chip Kelly. He didn't want to be here. He didn't want to be here. He tried to leave. That's Chip Kelly. That's the Chip Kelly that's been in Philadelphia.
You're assuming that Chip Kelly has learned nothing from his first stop in the NFL.
Absolutely.
Why assume that?
Absolutely. Well,
as a matter of fact,
you know why.
Why? Because he got a job too fast? Because he got another job too fast?
Because he got a job too fast, because of ego, and there's nothing to challenge it when you get a job that damn fast. If everybody's been telling me I stink and I'm wrong, but 3 weeks later I'm getting $6 million a year after getting fired, what have I really learned?
I will tell you.
What have I learned?
What you've learned is that your first job was a disaster, partly because you believe that...
He's not going to say it's a disaster. He was 26-21.
Partly because, well, you inherited a team, and then you made decisions over personnel, and then it became a disaster.
Right.
Like, based on your judgment and your ability to communicate with players, right?
Right.
And now you go to a place where the guy who you studied it when he was a college player and you were coaching a college team because you wanted to run elements of that thing is now your quarterback. Let's not forget also, Chip Kelly is pretty good at revamping a line, at least in terms of pass protection, right? In terms of pass blocking.
Which is a weakness of the San Francisco 49ers. Some would say, listen, if you're Chip Kelly, you want to be able to run the football. And can that offensive line create holes? You've got Staley, but then a bunch of supplementary parts that none of us really know of. You got Carlos Hyde, who can run the football, but his durability might be a question mark, okay? You got Chip Kelly, who may decimate his defense because they're so exhausted because of the fast pace in which he wants to play, and these guys having to make the adjustment to that could be an adjustment as well. There's too many question marks. I think it's a mistake.
Who are you starting, Cap or Gabbert?
Me personally, I'm starting Colin Kaepernick.
Me too. You know why? Because he's better. And Chip Kelly, job on the line, just win on Sunday. This kind of mentality, in the end, he's going to go for the better player.
If Chip Kelly starts Colin Kaepernick, it would be because of Colin Kaepernick's ability to run the football, and because Blaine.
Throw it down the field.
I'm just telling you what he would believe, and because of that, and because Blaine Gabbert hasn't shown him enough. But if Blaine Gabbert shows him anything, if it's a close fight in any way, he's going to give Blaine Gabbert.
You're going to run the read option with a guy who's jittery in the pocket?
Yep.
And slower than the other guy, and he can't throw it as far as the other guy?
I think Chip already knows.
The other guy went to a Super Bowl?
The guy traded away. The guy, even though Nick Foles is nothing to brag at home about, the guy traded away Foles for Bradford. No, Foles was making less than $1 million. Bradford's making $13 million. And trade him away.
Not that Bradford's been really good. He's so much better than Foles.
He did do some things for a season, though. Huh? He did do some things for a season.
Foles one season with Chip's offense, but otherwise has been terrible.
Yes, he has. Very much so. We ain't arguing about that.
You know who Chip wishes he had? One of these guys. Two of the best pass catchers in the league are getting ready to re-up their contracts. Who is more valuable, Gronk or Antonio Brown? That is a tough question. Stephen A. and Max enter it.
It ain't tough for me.
Oh. Performs, you take care of him. Yes, that would be in theory. We should note Steelers GM Kevin Colbert said Friday that the team would not renegotiate the Browns deal because the club does not renegotiate contracts with players who have more than 1 year remaining on deals. Jerome Bettis, the bus in the house. Always good to see you. Thank you for being with us. This is a tough one. Who's more valuable here, Gronk or Brown?
I think both of them are just as valuable to their respective teams. So I don't think there is one better than the other one. For New England, they're a more tight end based team. So Gronk fits, he's their #1 threat. So it makes a lot of sense and now bringing in Martellus Bennett, that's when Gronk had another tight end opposite of him, that's when he had his biggest year ever. He had 90 receptions, 1,300 yards. You know, he led the league in just about every category from a tight end perspective. And so they want to go back to that, much like the Steelers are a pass-oriented team. As much as it hurts me to say that, they want to throw the football. And Ben Roethlisberger is the best player on that team, so you've got to have a great receiver for that offense to go. Antonio Brown is that guy. So both guys are the #1 guys at their respective positions in the NFL and for their team.
Boss, that's not how it works. You got to choose a side, brother. Come on.
What's your gut? Gronk or Brown, right now?
Hey.
Which guy is worth it?
I'll take care of the bus in a minute.
You want me to go?
You
want me to go? Okay.
I'll take care of him in a second.
Let me take care of him.
I'm going to get on you.
Look, the answer is Antonio Brown. However, the more I look at it, the less I see it as a definitive answer. My knee-jerk reaction is, come on, man, you can't compare a tight end to Antonio, but this is not just any tight end. First of all, the tight end always has that, a great tight end always creates that mismatch with the DBs and the linebackers, who can really cover him. You need to devote 2 guys to him and all that. Secondly, you brought up the 2 tight end set. Aaron Hernandez, hate to bring up his name, but they were unstoppable when and now they bring in Bennett, and so maybe they have a kind of similar. Bennett's at least a B+, at least at that position, and so maybe they have the kind of a similar thing going on. Also, you see when Gronk is healthy, the Patriots are an unstoppable super team. When he's not, Belichick and Brady, they're still going to make the playoffs, but they're not going to win a Super Bowl. But when Gronk is healthy, it's like, oh, they're the odds-on favorite. I mean, he has an enormous impact. Then you look at the numbers, you go, look, I play daily fantasy. I know that Antonio Brown's the most valuable guy who's not this guy's insane. Gronk has the same number of touchdown passes over the catches over the last 2 seasons and more yards per catch than Antonio Brown.
So it is harder.
Stephen A., it is harder to find Gronk production at the position than it is to approximate Antonio Brown production at the position.
You know something? If I had some water right now, I might throw it on you, Max. And you don't start with me. Don't you start with me. Don't you start with me right now.
Good argument.
Let me stop it. Well, it's my turn. Okay. It's my turn. Ooh, this blasphemy. The blasphemy. Let me. Enough.
You know he played on the Steelers.
I see that.
I know he played on the Steelers.
You guys got a chunky ring right there.
He's got an affinity for the Steelers.
Let me tell you something right now. Okay. I just want to just throw this out there. Is anybody aware of the fact that over the last 2 years, Antonio Brown has had 265 catches? Is anybody aware? I'm not finished. It's a rhetorical question. I don't need answers.
136 last year.
Listen, and 129 before. You want me to do math class for you? Stop it. Just listen to me right now. Listen to me. Because it made me emotional. It's your fault. It's your fault, Jerome.
Okay.
Over the last 3 years, Antonio Brown has had 375 catches. 375 catches, okay? This dude, by the way, he's returned all 3 seasons. He's returned at least 1 punt for a touchdown. So he's a kickoff returner, he's a punt returner, and he's a receiver, catching 375 catches, all right? 375 in 3 seasons. Last year, 1,800 plus yards. The year before that, 1,600 plus yards. The year before that, 1,400 more yards. And we're talking about Rob Gronkowski. Look, I understand Rob Gronkowski, the best tight end in football. I understand that the way he's going is a future Hall of Famer. I understand the 2 tight end set. The fact that you got Tom Brady, who Bill Belichick has never put an elite offensive line in front of him. This dude needs to get off the ball quicker, which means you're throwing shorter passes, which means that Rob Gronkowski is that much more vital, particularly with the lack of durability on the part of an Edelman or an Amendola, somebody who always ends up concussed. Brandon LaFella's no longer going. He's in Seattle, so that's a non-factor. In the end, what it comes down to, Jerome Bettis, you understand, is that Antonio Brown is on another level because he's multifaceted. Max, he does more than one thing. He plays more than one position. He's utilized much more than Rob Gronkowski. The numbers show that he produces more. Just a numbers game alone.
He's foaming at the mouth. You got to get this guy a shot.
And last but not least, Jerome. You wish they had a running game. It upsets you that they're passing the football. Maybe if dudes could stay healthy, or didn't find themselves, in trouble. Maybe if they were Jerome Bettis and you could rely on them being on the field, maybe there would be more of a running game.
Okay. All right.
You and Max. I got
more for you right here.
I'm waiting. I'm waiting.
Go
ahead,
Max. I'll let you hit him.
What you are overlooking in all this is the strategic value that any team gets from having something where there's scarcity at the position. Now,
Preach.
what do I mean this?
Preach.
What do I mean by this?
Y'all go ahead.
You look at Odell Beckham Jr.'s numbers as a rookie.
No, it's good.
As a rookie, Odell Beckham, when you look at the totality of his numbers against all different kinds of coverages, the numbers he put up as a rookie were better than Antonio Brown's that year. And since then, you could look at Odell Beckham, you could look at Julio Jones when he's on the field. You could look at guys where you can, even if you want to make the argument, and I will agree with you, because ultimately I also take Antonio Brown. I just think it's much closer than you realize at first blush. You can look at Antonio Brown and say, yeah, he is number one. He puts up the biggest numbers, the eyeball test. He's the top guy. But you can approximate his value with various other receivers. You cannot approximate Rob Gronkowski's value at the position.
Oh, and that's all about Rob. Tom Brady has nothing to do with that.
Well,
Tom Brady has nothing to do with that.
Roethlisberger got nothing to do with it.
Excuse me. Oh, wait a minute. I recall 4 to 5 games last year, Antonio Brown doing exactly what he did with Landry Jones and Michael Vick as a quarterback.
What do you think Gronkowski's going to do with Garoppolo?
A couple games he did not.
Well, listen, a couple of games.
Stephen A., what do you think? What do you think Gronkowski's
can't say that. When Michael Vick was in,
that's true.
Antonio Brown
listen, you can't catch the ball for yourself. I mean, somebody got to throw the ball. They ain't throw the ball. I mean, what do you get? Don't get me started on the game against the Ravens when he threw it 10 feet over his head.
So Max made a point about approximating the receiver, right?
Okay.
The next closest receiver to Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, who tied him in receptions and led him in yards. Okay? So this is not an out-of-the-world comparison at the wide receiver position. Now you look at the tight end position, Gronk, number one.
Everyone else like number 10.
But here's the point that I'm making.
Okay.
But here's the point that I'm trying to make.
Okay.
As much as you want to say Antonio Brown is the clear more valuable player, it's really respective to the team. Value is in the team. So you look at Gronk. Gronk, he plays the wide receiver position as well. So he's not just a tight end. Okay, he lines up at the wide receiver. So he is, moving around. He's not just.
That's the same thing Jimmy Graham tried to claim, and it didn't work for him.
Gronk does it. But Gronk does it. It's not even.
I understand that.
So the point that I'm trying to make to you is when we look at Antonio Brown and we look at Gronk, who's more valuable? In which offense?
Because it still affects the win-loss record more.
Look, Stephen A.,
and when you look at Gronk and you look at New England, they are perennial playoff team.
Yeah, but if push comes to shove, I will agree with Stephen A. I believe the answer is Antonio Brown. My only point is when it was first asked, I was like, oh, is this even a question? And by the time I was done thinking about it, I said, I'll still take Antonio Brown, but it is damn close. And Gronk is
You have to look at
I don't think,
the values.
Y'all gonna, especially you, and you just move out the way.
I'm just saying this right now. I'm not trying to be a homer. All I want to show is that I'm not trying to be a homer. Hold on. Let me zero in. Look at perspective-wise.
I got it.
You can look at
I got it. Pittsburgh Steelers should be allowed in the Steelers camp right now. Let me turn to you, Max Kellerman. Are you not the guy that just sat up here on the air? You had the camera look at you the other day and said, "What? What's the problem, Molly? What's the problem, Molly?"
Don't use my own words against me.
You trying to side with
everybody? Just trying to side across, man.
Hold on. Is it not you? Is it not you that called the camera to look at you and say, Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback ever? That was you. Yep. Is it not you that said, and by the way, Bill Belichick is the greatest coach ever? So let me get this straight. You just went on some soliloquy about Rob Gronkowski, and it's damn close, but no mention of the greatest quarterback ever. No mention of the greatest coach ever. No mention of the system that has benefited not just Tom Brady, but Rob Gronkowski, who's a stud, and I get that, and I know how elite he is. When you look at Antonio Brown and 3 175 catches, 1,400 one year, 1,600 the other year, 1,800 last year, 375 catches, punch returns, kicks returns. What are y'all talking
about? Hold on, time out 1 second.
What?
Time out. Everything is true about Brady and Belichick. You act like Ben Roethlisberger and Mike Tomlin are chopped liver.
Yeah.
No.
Ben Roethlisberger going to the Hall of Fame.
No, but you don't hear people talking about Mike Tomlin's system.
True.
You hear that about Belichick.
Tomlin's a great coach.
Stop it. Yeah.
Tomlin's a great coach.
And Ben Roethlisberger is vastly underrated.
Yeah.
Vastly.
I don't think so. I think he's a Hall of Famer.
So what I take away from this conversation is it's Gronk. Jerome, thank you.
No,
so much.
I'm kidding. All I'm saying is that it's closer to even.
I'm kidding. I'm so kidding.
Okay.
The media gets on James Harden all the time. But now his former teammate Kevin Durant has his back. We'll react to what KD said back to the NBA would first take.
Jerome Bettis ain't coming with us to Pittsburgh. He's not coming.
Association now, though. After making the All-NBA first team 2 seasons ago, James Harden failed to make an All-NBA team this season. Many have criticized Harden for his lack of defense and effort at times. Now, his former teammate Kevin Durant has come to his defense, telling the Houston Chronicle, quote, "Everybody on the outside doesn't really appreciate what he brings. Anybody that can put up 29 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists, and not make the All-NBA team, that's like a sin to even think about not putting a guy like that on the All-NBA team." Stephen A., does Katie have a point about Harden?
No, he does not. Where are you going to put him? When you consider the year that the Golden State Warriors have had, when you consider LeBron, when you consider the greatness of Kevin Durant along with Russell Westbrook, and the down year that the Houston Rockets had, and the reason that James Harden was in the news, what do you expect? Let me be very, very clear about James Harden. James Harden is an absolute stud. He is a superstar offensive player. Defensively, sometimes he shows up, sometimes he doesn't. His greatest year as a defender was fresh off of playing with Coach K. In the, I think it was the pre-Olympics or whatever it was a couple of years back. And then he came on the basketball court and he showed more of a concerted effort on the defensive side of the ball. James Harden can do whatever's required. He's that elite of a talent. The problem is he doesn't always want to do it on the defensive end of the floor. Now, in his defense, that may have to do with the offensive responsibilities that he may have, carrying the load for the Houston Rockets. And because of that, sometimes you conserve your energy because everybody's not going to be Jordan or Kobe or LeBron where they never let up on the defensive end of the floor. But nevertheless, that's been the case with James Harden. So Kevin Durant is not wrong for coming to the defense of his former teammate who never should have left OKC. The Thunder should have come up with the extra $4 or $5 million to keep him on board, no doubt. They probably would have won a championship in OKC before Kevin Durant decided to leave had James Harden never left. But nevertheless, he did leave. And Kevin Durant's not wrong for highlighting his greatness because James Harden is great. But he is a bit disingenuous in ignoring why people are somewhat critical of James Harden. Another thing to bring in the point, it is widely believed that James Harden is the reason that Kevin McHale was fired after 11 games into the season. He had a meeting with management, and the next thing you know, Kevin McHale is gone. Now, that may not be fair to James Harden because clearly he's categorically denied such a thing. But nevertheless, there are people who have been saying that about him in NBA circles.
And how'd that work out without McHale?
And how did that work out? Not very, very well, even though I do believe Bickerstaff did a damn good job considering the turmoil that surrounded the team. You've got a guy like Dwight Howard who's now in Orlando. Some people feel he's fell off and he's got a lot to prove. But Dwight Howard would make the case that, damn, I can't dribble the ball and pass it to myself. People should be setting things up for me and giving me the ball. And sometimes James Harden would look off. We could also look at James Harden and as electric and elite and sensational as he is as a basketball player. There's usually a lot of dribbling that takes place before he takes a shot. Well, how does that work when you got 4 teammates around you who aren't necessarily seeing the basketball that much? So again, Kevin Durant is not wrong when he talks about the greatness of James Harden, but considering the year that he had and what was the storylines that surrounded him and some of the cynicism that comes attached to him, you're not telling the whole story when you tell why he wasn't picked first team, because clearly people are saying it ain't all about the numbers. Sometimes numbers do lie just a touch.
Kevin Durant is wrong when he calls James Harden a great player. Now, I want to be very clear about this. Yep, I want to be very clear.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He's not a great player.
You're saying James Harden's not a great player?
He's a very good player. He's not a great one.
Go ahead.
Now, and by the way, Carmelo Anthony, same thing right now.
Well, right now, yeah.
Yep.
Well, go ahead. Go ahead. I'll get back to that James Harden thing.
I'll get to the difference between good and great in a second. But
yes,
this is what. First of all, the league is changing under these players' feet. So some of the stuff they could do really well, for example, in the previous era, score in isolation, is much less valued now. And fans are getting more sophisticated. If you don't play defense, they recognize, see that other guy, maybe you're a little better in terms of, not even offensively, in terms of scoring the ball, but he actually plays defense. Here's the thing about Harden, and I want to make it very clear. There's a difference between a good player, a very good player, who really doesn't have the potential to be great. We've seen enough. We know it's not in there anywhere. And a guy like Harden. When I watch Harden play, I go, the question I always ask myself, if you're supposedly elite in the NBA, is, can you be the best player on a championship team? The answer for Harden is yes, it's possible. It's in there somewhere, because we've seen him play defense at times. We see what he can do when he's playing the right way. He's capable of it. It's in there, but it hasn't come out of him yet. He was very bad in the finals when he was on OKC. Fine, he was coming off the bench. He and Westbrook and Durant somehow were a little inefficient, the three of them together. They were kind of less than the sum of their parts. The whole was less than the sum of its parts. I get all that. But if you really watch Harden throughout most of his career, does he rack up a lot of assists? Yeah. When do those assists come? Dribble, dribble, dribble. He's very good at getting to the line, but if he can't get his own shot...
Nobody's better at getting to the line.
He's amazing. And that's a high percentage thing to do, and so is shooting threes the way he does. But if he can't do that, he waits till the shot clock's almost up. Then he passes the ball to someone. They're like, we've been standing around getting cold. Now I don't really have an open look. And like, he gets his assists that way at times. I don't see him get the hockey assist too often, even though he's capable of doing it. What Durant is reacting to with Harden is what players frequently react to with guys like Harden and guys like Carmelo. A player knows better than anyone how hard it is to do what Harden does so well at the highest level. They know how much work goes into it. And the fact that Harden can do so many things so well, his peers recognize that's so hard to do. He's great. But it's not just that you have the tools, it's how you apply them. And James Harden has all the tools, does not apply them in a way where you can say that guy is a great NBA player.
Couple of things. Number one, he's a career 85% shooter from the free throw line. He shot 86% from the free throw line the last 3 years, so we know that.
High percentage player.
Secondly, Kevin Durant wasn't just reacting to what you just articulated. Primarily, he was reacting to the cynicism aimed in the direction of a friend of his and a former teammate, because that's what Kevin Durant tends to do these days. Thirdly, and more importantly, when you talk about what James Harden doesn't do on occasion, that's the difference between you and I in terms of our definition of greatness. My definition of greatness is a couple of things. There are times when James Harden didn't show up in big moments. Like, he was mad at me for years or whatever. I mean, we say hi and bye, but I mean, because he has damn right, and they better get over it, because I'm gonna keep telling the truth. The fact of the matter is that in that finals against Miami, there was an APB out on him. We couldn't find him. There were times when he was wide open at the free throw line, wide open at foul line extended, etc., elbow, and literally would not take shots, which is something we're not accustomed to seeing James Harden do. His talent is unquestionable, but he didn't show up in big moments last year. He didn't show up in big moments at the time. In the playoffs a couple of years back, even when they came back from that deficit against the Clippers and went on that like 49-9 run in that Game 6, James Harden was on the bench. They were doing that without him on the floor.
He's a one-way player, which you brought up. He's a one-way player.
But here's the thing. This is why I say you still can't deny his greatness. Despite all of those things you mentioned, and they're not wrong, you said the most important thing. What guys work diligently to pray and hope they can acquire, this guy does in his sleep. This guy averaged 29. He averaged 25. He averaged 26 a game. Shoots better than 45% from the field. Gets to the free throw line at will. Got a nasty handle. Can play the point. Can do so many different things. That I'm speaking about is what he possesses, his skill set.
I'm not always saying
results.
His skill set is the toolbox. He's got all the tools.
Well, that means you can be greater.
But how do you apply them? But the ball sticks with him. His teammates don't like it.
And I'm saying to you that there's a difference. Just because you're great doesn't mean someone isn't great to her. But it doesn't take away from the fact that you're great. It's just an elevated level. We got a whole bunch of Hall of Famers. Does everybody deserve to be in the same room as Michael?
Is James Harden an MVP caliber player for real? Is he an MVP?
I thought he was, not this past season, but the season before.
I disagree. I don't think
the season before I thought.
I think he should be.
The season before I thought
he can be, but I don't think he is right now.
Not right now, based on last season.
Based on last season. You're going very good. Right. You're sticking with great different definitions, though. D. Wade spoke with Kerry Champion at SportsCenter Sunday's Conversation. What did we learn about Wade going to Chicago, the newest Bull? We'll react. Tim returning to his hometown when we.
Fair.
Yeah.
You're talking about one-on-ones. The one-on-one is structured for the quarterback and wide receiver to win all the time. No pass rush. Quarterback just sits there and pats the ball. The wide receiver runs his route exactly how he wants to run. There's no pressure involved on the quarterback side. We used to get beat like this all the time as a defensive back. I don't care who you are. In one-on-ones, it's set up for the wide receivers to win, and that's totally unfair.
Yeah, one-on-ones, like in the NFL, when Norman's on Odell Beckham, it's set up for the wide receiver to win.
No, that's totally different.
Burnt him all day.
Yeah, but
dropped a couple passes, but
thank you.
Okay,
that doesn't mean.
Okay,
when you
but it's not because Norman was in the. Where was Norman?
That's not getting burned when he dropped the pass.
Where was Norman?
Doesn't matter. Did he drop the ball?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is what I'm saying to you. With pressure, it's a totally different game. And we saw Josh Norman. Listen, am I saying Josh Norman is the elite of the elite, like Richard Sherman? No.
That's what we want to know. Is he worth this money?
I think he's worth the money. If someone's willing to pay it, yes, you are worth the money.
But you're
Simple
saying
as that.
He's not elite.
No. But if you were a GM and you had to price talent, is he worth being the highest paid corner in the NFL?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But if I am a team like the Washington Redskins and I feel like I need a corner, listen, cornerbacks are just like quarterbacks, are just like left tackles. They don't walk around and they don't grow on trees.
Right.
You have to find a guy that can willingly go 50-50 on the outside and match up with Dez Bryant, Odell Beckham, whoever it is.
They still got to find that guy.
And that's, well, I feel like the Washington Redskins make that decision that said they saw what he did against Odell Beckham, which he played okay. I mean, it wasn't great, but they saw what he did with Dez Bryant, and he shut Dez out for 4 quarters. So that's what you want, and that's what a lot of teams do. They see a guy in a different division or a different conference, and they say, this is how he matched up with certain guys. We want him on this team, and is he worth the $15 million? Yes, he's worth the $15 million to the Washington Redskins.
I don't like this.
Why?
I actually agree with Darren. He's not wrong. Here's the deal, Max. First of all, Josh Norman can play. That's number one. Secondly, Odell Beckham Jr., there's no shame in losing to him. This brother's on another level. We understand he dropped one pass. We understand that there was a couple of times he got open. We understand that he lost his head a little bit, and had that not been the case, it would have been one of those situations where essentially what it would have come down to is that Odell Beckham Jr. may have ended up getting the better of Josh Norman even more so than he actually did. I get all of that. But here's the bottom line. When you look at it, pay attention to what's transpiring. You got Joe Barry and his zone schemes. You've got the fact that Josh Norman is a system player. Now, if you hired him to be a shutdown corner a la Deion Sanders, of course there's a problem. Where I agree with Darren, where we're being unfair to Josh Norman, even though Josh Norman is capable of covering, the reality is that when you looked at Carolina's defense, there was some zone going on. He was assisted. You had the crew, Kuechly and Thomas and the boys. You know, he wasn't alone. In Washington, they gave him that money not just because of his talent, his name, his cachet, and the fact that they needed to buffer their secondary, but also because they knew that they're going to be playing zone schemes. They're going to be employing that. So what you did was grab a guy that you knew you would need, because Breland being back there by himself, or with an aging D'Angelo Hall who could still play, you needed some assistance. You needed a name. You drafted some kid in the 3rd round to play corner, where you were ultimately able to get rid of Culliver and unload him. So they buffered their secondary, because that's a problem. Then you look at Kerrigan and the crew, and you look at this rookie, Preston Smith, who led all rookies with 8 sacks last year. If you're capable of getting to the passer more, and you're playing zone, Then, obviously, like Darren is alluding to, you're going to have a limited amount of time to get at the quarterback. Therefore, you got Josh Norman, who's going to look even better because of that, not to mention the fact that he's going to have help. It's not some kind of matchup with him against Odell Beckham Jr., because if we're being real about it, is there anybody that you know of in the NFL? I don't care whether it's Patrick Patterson, that is a bad boy, whether it's Richard Sherman or my man Joe Hayden in Cleveland, who don't get enough love, but he gonna get it here because Joe Hayden's a bad boy. Okay, so let's be real. Can anyone up here definitively, and you know your football too, Molly, can anybody sit here right now and say that anybody in the NFL can guard Odell Beckham Jr. by themselves?
No.
One-on-one?
No.
Well, then what's the problem?
Here's the problem. Well, first of all, let me start by saying Josh Norman's a good player. I thought he was a crazy great player, like top 3 defensive player for a while, and then I saw certain things that had me back off that and say, no, this is a zone corner. And don't forget, Washington's the kind of place like Champ Bailey, when they traded Clinton Portis when running backs still had a lot of value, and Portis was like, I mean, he was just a flash. You couldn't even see. They traded Portis in his prime for Champ Bailey. They value shut-down corners at a point when Champ Bailey was the best corner in the game. That's not what they're getting here. They're not getting a shut-down corner here. Now, I'll even give him some credit as even not just trying to just win the argument, that he's more mature than Odell. And the fact that Odell had never dropped a pass where he was targeted and just drops the pass in his career, and he dropped 2 that day, I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that Norman applied enough psychological, at least, pressure to Odell that it rattled him. Yeah. And you even hear Odell's comments since then. Odell's still fixated on this dude, and Norman's like, yo, why are you still talking about me? And Odell's the much more famous player and considered even better at his position. I'm not going to argue that. And I also understand if you're going to run zone and different things, he's a very useful player, Josh Norman. I get that. This is my issue. The NFL is a hard cap league. In a hard cap league, the job of a GM before anything else is to properly price commodities. In this case, players. You better be able to put the prices right. You better be able to price that properly, because every dollar you overpay for one guy is a dollar you can't pay for another guy. Now I ask you this. Is Josh Norman worth a $50 million guarantee?
Go ahead, Darren.
Hey, you know what? If the Washington Redskins are willing to pay what they paid him, whatever it is. But listen,
I'm not saying that's not his market value. I'm saying should they have?
I think they
did they properly price him?
Come on. I do. I absolutely do. Now listen, I haven't always been a Josh Norman fan. Have not. And it took me until last year to watch from week 6 on to see what kind of player he is. This is what you're getting in Josh Norman. Are you getting a shutdown, follow you around corner? No, you're not getting Patrick Peterson. You're not getting Richard Sherman or maybe Darrelle Revis, but what you are getting is a guy with tremendous confidence, a guy that you feed off of. I've played with players that were half as talented as Josh Norman, but they had tremendous confidence, and you feed off of it as a unit. And I thought when you watch Carolina play, Josh Norman was in a huddle, and he saw whoever broke the huddle, Larry Fitzgerald went that way, there went Josh Norman. He's in your face. That's what you want to see in your player. A smart football player that's greedy and wants it.
Here's the deal, y'all. Look at this list here, these dollars. Josh Norman's at number 1, $50 million guaranteed. Patrick Peterson's number 2, $48 million.
I get that.
Joe Hayden, $45 million, number 3. Richard Sherman, $40 million, number 4. Darrelle Revis, number 5, at $39 million. Janoris Jenkins, number 6, $28.8 million. You could make a legitimate argument that there are about 4 corners in the NFL that may be better than Josh Norman.
Absolutely.
Straight up.
Yeah.
That's no disrespect to Josh Norman, all right? But let me also take into account, not only are you paying for production, but you also pay for potential, which is something that we try to gloss over, but that's a reality. Josh Norman is 28. Josh Norman is not only 28, but this dude was from some nondescript school in Carolina, Coastal Carolina, if I remember correctly, okay? Worked his way up, worked his way through the practice squad and beyond. He didn't even want to leave Carolina. He just wanted what he thought his worth was. Right. And he wanted them to break the bank for him. Fair enough. What I'm saying to you is that when you are 28 years of age and you went through the terrain that he went through, wasn't the first round pick, wasn't the seventh round pick, okay? He went, and you work your way onto a National Football League team and get to a point where you establish yourself from being some nondescript dude on a practice squad to being one of the elite corners in the game, because just because you might not be top 4 don't make you elite.
That's right.
When you combine that with the fact that the need for the team that you went to is similar to the system you played in Carolina. You combine that with the fact that you went from Carolina in the NFC South to the NFC East, where only one team was over 500 and everybody else stuck up the joint and wet the bed. I'm sorry. That justifies the dollars.
Well,
that justifies the dollars.
I'm happy he got his money.
I know that. I know that, but I'm saying it justifies
it.
I'm saying it justifies it if you're the Redskins.
Look, I get it. Also, he's the next man up, and this is how it works. Whoever the latest really good player is resets the market.
That's right.
That's generally how it works. I just think if you're going to guarantee the most dollars in the NFL at the position to a corner, that guy should be a shutdown corner. There aren't that many of them, I get it, but I don't think that's Norman.
Well, I'm saying you don't think that's Norman, but my problem is this. Let's look at the Redskins. Let's look at the fact that they're 9-7. Let's look at the fact that they franchise tagged their quarterback at $19.9 million. Let's look at the fact that they were the lone team over 500, that they've been a playoff, that they are a playoff team. Now, they haven't made back-to-back playoff spots since 96, 97, okay? And they haven't, and Lord knows,
they ain't going to do it this time either.
Well, they may not, but we don't know that. We don't know that. Questions about the Giants' defense, no matter how much money they spent. Questions about the Eagles all over. Question about the health and the psyche of your Dallas Cowboys. But they're not knuckleheads, but their actions are indicative of knuckleheadedness. Okay? So you got all of that going on. It's just the truth, Darren. It's just the truth.
Go ahead.
So I'm just saying, if you look at Washington, you go out, you get Norman. You draft another corner in the 3rd round. You still got Breland, who is elevating, okay? You still got D'Angelo Hall, who is experienced. You got the Ryan Kerrigan. You got a rookie that's got 8 sacks on his docket, backing up Kerrigan. You've got a team with a potential pass rush. Now, they give up too many yards rushing on the first time. That was their impediment on defense, believe it or not. It wasn't their passing defense. It was the fact that they gave up over 5 yards or a rush on first downs. So you take all of that in consideration. If you're in the process of cleaning this up, which Josh Norman's presence will help assist in that matter, then I think it's a good deal.
If the point is that they are at a moment of like extreme leverage for a player where the right guy can put them over the top, a tipping point, right?
Absolutely.
Like Gladwell can tip them in the right direction, and Norman is that guy, then maybe you can justify the $50 million.
And I'm saying to you, Max,
you better get it done now.
But here's what I'm saying to you, Max. Maybe, just maybe, what you're not saying is what you need to say. The Giants stunk up the joint. The Dallas Cowboys stunk up the joint. Maybe what you're really saying is that the